Hello and welcome to today's workshop, AWP xChange, Building a Foundation for AWP. This is the first session in a three-part series. So before we begin, here's a little bit about us. We are a modern web-based platform that leverages advanced work packaging and agile best practices to disrupt the status quo for companies in industrial construction who want to improve productivity, safety, quality, and predictability. So we'll start with a quick safety moment here. And this is important to know, especially with the seasons changing and allergies affecting everyone. And the big question is often, I've got all these symptoms. Is it actually allergies or is it maybe COVID? So here's a quick and easy checklist. Pretty self-explanatory, but the difference, I think the big difference between COVID and allergies would be you would have a fever with COVID, and allergies can kind of run the gamut from a lot of other similar symptoms with sneezing and headaches, body aches, cough, all of those things that come with allergies. But it's important to kind of pay attention between the two, because if you're feeling some of those other symptoms like fever, then you should definitely go see your doctor and get checked out, because you don't want to spread the virus, obviously. So just pay attention to your body and your symptoms and talk to your physician for more information. Okay, so today's agenda starts with a little background on what AWP is, and we'll provide the information for setting the foundation. And then we'll review the need for an implementation toolkit and the available material. Next, we'll review the plan for the toolkit, and then we'll begin our interactive portion using Mural. And as a reminder, you have received an email yesterday with directions on how to use it. And if not, we are providing the link in the chat. The GoToWebinar chat panel over there, you can click that and join Mural once we get to that section. And then we will go over our plans for the next session. And lastly, if you have any questions, please submit them in the GoToWebinar chat and we'll answer them as time allows. And as a reminder, you will receive a copy of the slides and a recording of today's presentation in the coming days. So let's meet today's speaker. This is Andrew Foy. He is O3 Solutions Director of AWP and Construction Excellence. Andrew has over 16 years of industrial construction experience with an extensive AWP background, and he served on many boards and committees. So with that, I will turn it over to Andrew, and thank you for joining us today.
Tari, thank you very much for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, depending on where you are in the world today. So first of all, a little bit of background. For those of you familiar with AWP, and for those of you unfamiliar with AWP, CII, which is the Construction Industry Institute here in the US, made AWP a best practice in 2015. Since then, they've had various subcommittees and working groups within CII steadily developing more material to support AWP implementation and usage. Essentially, without wishing to sound too dramatic about it, AWP is exploding in terms of it started off in Canada and came into the US, and we're very, very quickly seeing a rapid international growth. There's a lot of material out there, but what we've seen, or what we've not seen, I suppose, what we're lacking is what I see as a single, coherent, complete walkthrough for how to do AWP on a project. One that's based on a sample project and gives proper consideration to technology. We've got a lot of theory out there. We've got a lot of here's how to do it. What we're lacking is here's a guide, here's an actual version of it. Here's something that you can understand when we point to a piece of pipe. I mean, a lot of people in our industry relate to and understand things better when they can see it in practicality. So today, what I wanted to do is unveil O3's plans for what we're referring to as an AWP Implementation Toolkit. We want to help companies that are starting on their AWP journey to understand a systematic step-by-step approach for implementing AWP using a sample project. We want to step away from the abstract. We want to get away from the theory. We want to make this real using actual models, real world examples, project specific content, things that actually talk to the people that are reading it, things that those people can recognize and say, yes, I've done this before. We want to make the deliverables relatable and easy to understand for project professionals. Like I said, take it away from the theory, make it something that they can look at and say, yeah, I might have implemented a project like this. I might have executed a project like this in the past. So why are you going to listen to us? Why are you going to listen to a technology company telling you about this? So firstly, I'm not going to tell you that we have all the answers. Nobody does. That's part of the reason that we're here today. In fact, the very important part of the second half of this whole session is we want to hear from you. We want to hear what it is that you want to hear. We want to hear what it is you need to know, what your challenges are. And some of you are going to be new to AWP, and some of you are going to bring lots of those questions. Some of you are going to be existing practitioners, and we'll have other ideas about the way things can be done. That's what we want to know. We want to be able to glean the best information that we can and provide something coherent back to everybody. So that being said, O3 is the first and only software solution dedicated to supporting AWP across all project phases. We know what's needed to make AWP work. We've literally mapped it out, and our software has been built from the ground up specifically to support AWP. Personally, on my end, I have years of real-world experience creating and rolling out AWP programs from scratch for various organizations across America and Canada. And typically when I start with a company building an AWP program, it starts with that wonderful blank piece of paper. And part of what I'm trying to get to today is when I started an AWP, I wished that there was somebody handing out a free go-to guide as to how to do it, rather than having to figure it all out from some of the existing materials that were available. So essentially, if you're responsible for making AWP work for your organization, I've been in your shoes. So we're going to share this experience coupled with the most advanced AWP software on the market. So why are we giving this away for free? We're talking about free issuing this to the community. So yes, we could be charging for this, but we want to help the AWP community to grow, and we want to help the industry move forward. And the best way to do that is to spread the message to as wide an audience as possible. This thing will not expand if all we're doing is considering a narrow audience and listening to the same few opinions that have helped craft this. There's a lot of people who put in a lot of work to get AWP to this point, and they've done a fantastic job. We need to augment that now with the additional input and feedback from people like yourselves who are getting into it. One of the other things we want to tackle here is simplification. There's a lot of information about AWP, excuse me, and it's easy to get flooded with detail. But for all the detail, the information sometimes lacks what I would refer to as just a simple headline. So there are some tools, and we'll get to some of these, like the AWP Primer from Cii, that try to distill AWP down to its basic components, and it's a great start. But we want to provide this whole toolkit in a way that doesn't scare people off and to make them think they need a PhD in astrophysics to understand AWP. We want to make the project situations relatable and the detail appropriate to the audience. People get scared when you start talking about AWP. It looks like this big beast, this giant thing that's going to take over the planet. It's not. It's basically a best practice of the way that a lot of people have been executing parts of how they do their project and pulling all of those best parts together into a single coherent, repeatable process. So that being said, let's take a look at the planned content of the AWP Implementation Toolkit. So what I'm showing you is kind of like the table of contents for what we're going to be rolling out here over the next year. So the first phase is just understanding what AWP is and how it can help your organization. You need to calculate the value of AWP and make a business case for its use. If you're the nominated AWP champion for your organization, you've been tasked with figuring out what AWP is and whether it makes sense to bring it into your company. So again, if you get sat in that chair and told, here's a blank piece of paper, go figure it out, where do you begin? So in this first section, the first set of release that we're planning, we're calling it the Learn section, and we're going to cover how to learn about what AWP is. and wade through the mountains of information to really help you grasp what AWP is at a practical level. Now, I'm not going to be rewriting the dictionary on what AWP is. What this is going to be is helping you to understand where to go to get the information that you need from what's already out there. There's a lot of good content about what AWP is. We're going to look at how to calculate return on investment, known as ROI, by assessing the costs and the benefits of AWP to ensure that it will bring value. On a side note, AWP isn't all about money. It will bring benefits for safety, quality, schedule, predictability, and a range of other areas. But unfortunately, it's the nature of the beast that the first thing most companies want to know is how much is it going to cost me? And on the flip side, how much is it going to save me? So you need to be able to show that there's going to be some financial value to the company. Then we're going to describe how to build your business case for implementing AWP. Is it just a question of knocking on your boss's door and asking nicely? What do you need to do to get management buy-in? How are you going to convince them that AWP is right for you? Then once we've sold it to management, we're going to look at how to select a pilot program for implementation. Does it matter which project you choose to implement AWP on? And I'll give you a hint, yes, it does. So in the next section, in the plan section, we're going to get into some of the practicalities of early implementation steps. And that's going to be one of the big ones, creating a procedure for AWP and the associated workflows for your company. That's going to form your AWP manual. We're going to look at things like what the differences are, depending on whether you're the owner, the EP, a CM organization, a construction contractor. What we want to give you and what I've seen as the best AWP guides, AWP sort of manuals, if you like, is a step-by-step guide. Because again, you get this lot of theory and all these things that you need to do. But what I want is a walkthrough. Start here, do this thing first. And then once you've done that, do this thing. And then once you've done that, do this thing. So we want to give you a paint by numbers guide to implementation. And we want to get rid of the idea that AWP is this giant complicated beast. We're going to show that it can be a simple systematic process. One of the big things I've learned about AWP, you're going to do these things, all these steps, all these processes anyway. Like, we talk about path of construction with AWP, planning out the sequence of installation. You're going to do that on a project, whether you're doing AWP or not. It's just a question of timing. Are you going to do that the week before you start construction and suddenly realize you don't have a bunch of the material that you need? Or are you going to do that back in the early stages? So a lot of these things aren't additional effort. They're not additional work. If you're executing a project, you need to be doing a lot of this stuff anyway. A lot of it's about putting it in the right sequence and putting it at the right time to make sure that it's going to help structure and plan the project well. Lastly, we're going to consider the big question of what you need to do when selecting AWP technology. One of my colleagues put it very, very well yesterday. You don't need technology to execute AWP, but if you are executing AWP without technology, the best of luck to you, I believe. And Robin, I apologize if I ripped off your line there. So the old wisdom held that you needed to spend a long time getting your AWP process nailed down before you even thought about technology. But the Odor 3 platform has been purpose-built to support AWP from start to finish. We've got the best practices baked directly into the product. So implementing technology early can actually help provide a solid foundation for your AWP implementation. And unfortunately, technology is like everything else within AWP. If you leave it too late, you're not going to get the benefit. Okay, now we're into, and again, I know some people call these things different things, so we're looking at the terminology of FEL1, FEL2, FEL3, etc., which can often be called select in the case of FEL2, or define or feed in the case of FEL3. So this is where the rubber meets the road. You're in a project now. You've done all your prep, you've done all your research, you sold it to management, now you're actually in a project. So first up, we're starting during FEL2, the select stage, and we're going to show you how to create construction work areas, a path of construction, a work breakdown structure to support AWP, and an AWP plan. These are the building blocks for AWP, and getting these right is going to set you on the correct path. The path of construction is the single most important deliverable for AWP on the project. Frankly, you can implement AWP just by doing a path of construction, even if you don't do all the stuff that comes after that. If that's the place you start, I've helped companies whose starting point is just to do path of construction from the beginning. So that is the foundational step of how to do AWP, and it's the way that you get the conversation started properly. In each case with these deliverables that we're talking about, we're not just going to tell you how we did it. We're going to provide you a functioning copy to show what a real one looks like, albeit for a fake project, and a template for your use. So we're trying to disabuse this notion that there's some magic behind the curtain. There isn't. This is, in the case of path of construction, this is a bunch of people getting together, oftentimes putting sticky notes on a big wall and agreeing how this thing can flow and then writing it down. So in each case, we want to provide you with something that shows what we did, how we did it. Doing anything during FEL2 can seem a little daunting when project information and design progression is at a minimum. This is also the very reason why it's the perfect time to start. Again, somebody, there's a popular line, if you're doing AWP a week before construction, it's not AWP. And that's absolutely true. You need to start in the early phases for the whole advanced part of advanced work packaging to make sense. Your construction decisions will have the best chance of having a meaningful impact on the project during these early stages, and any design optimizations that you do are much easier to incorporate when they don't risk extensive rework. If you have a great idea halfway through detailed design, it might be a great idea, but it might risk creating a whole month of rework for the engineers, and then all of a sudden the value's lost. So then as you get to the end of FEL2, and you're preparing to go through what is typically going to be one of your early stage gates, we're going to look at creating your master index. And that's going to be essentially the list of all your work packages for AWP. We're going to look at an AWP compliance schedule and a project estimate. So for items like the schedule and the estimate, we're not talking about writing a user manual for P6 or writing an estimating procedure. We just want to cover the ways that AWP impacts how the schedule and the estimate are set up. We need to get early alignment between your deliverables, get your naming conventions sorted out, make sure everyone on the team knows the priorities and the sequence. If you can do that in FEL, you're well on your way. And one of the other things it's always important to cover when you're talking about the foundational aspects of AWP is we need to also shine a light on the things that don't change. A lot of people think that, like I said earlier, AWP is going to come in and take over. It's not going to be this all-encompassing. It's going to show you how you need to adapt your existing tools and processes, hopefully as little as possible, to fit into AWP. So like I said, if you build your schedules in P6, you're going to keep building your schedules in P6. All that AWP is going to do is ask that you do it in such a way that it can line up to the work packages below it. Okay, now we're into FEL3, define or feed, depending on your terminology. In this stage, it's all about refinement. So we're going to refine the path of construction with the additional detail we've received from the design progression. AWP in this stage mirrors the goal of the overall stage itself. It's optimization. The path of construction from FEL2 wasn't perfect. You didn't know everything. But the reason to do it in FEL2 is to give you a starting point and to start looking at it in the right way. During FEL3, you're going to challenge all your assumptions. You're going to make sure that all the stakeholders have a voice. And you can finalize your plan by the end of the stage so that the engineers can meet your expectations during detailed design. Again, if you keep changing the plan during detailed design or having new great ideas, they might be good ideas, but they're likely going to cause a lot of churn. We're also going to look at updating the master index because, again, you have better design progression, you've got more information. And we're also going to look at what the data requirements are for the 3D model. And again, a lot of work has been done in industry with this as to, everybody at first was talking about these various disparate things that they needed to make their AWP program work. I know CII's put in a lot of research on a standardized set, and O3 has a standardized set of data requirements as well to support what our technology needs, most of which are very, very similar. The model, the three-dimensional model, is going to be an invaluable tool for AWP, and particularly for work-phase planning. Again, one of my colleagues the other day said it's no longer just a pretty picture, and it's very, very true. But a bad model with limited or incorrect data can cause a huge amount of additional churn and rework downstream. Getting it right from the beginning relies on making sure that the engineering contractor knows the expectations and can meet them. So for the end of phase deliverables, so once we get to part B, the end of FEL3, again, it's refinement, it's updating. So we're going to update the estimate and the schedule, particularly at this stage down to the CWP level. You need to get to that plus minus 10% estimate. We need to make sure the schedule has enough detail to support the CWPs. And we're also going to tackle one of the big questions that we always get asked, and that's contract language. I've seen many different approaches to contract language, how to get AWP into the contract over the years. No two of them have ever been alike. So we're going to share our thoughts on the best practical approach, both in terms of content and critically in terms of timing. Okay, detailed design. So plans have been made, priorities have been set, all the project stakeholders know what the installation sequence is, and your schedule is going to keep you running like clockwork, because everybody knows that a P6 schedule is the only thing that saves a project, and that's sarcasm. So now, during detailed design, AWP focus switches to monitoring engineering progress. So we're going to look at things like key performance indicators for engineering to help you keep a close eye on the deliverables. What should you be looking for? What should you be tracking? Again, you don't want to get to the end of or near the end of detailed design and everybody's been saying, yeah, everything's good, and then you realize you're going to fall flat on your face because nothing's coming. So having those KPIs, something that's going to keep visibility on the progress that engineering's making so that we can see problems coming. And we're going to look at what an EWP should be, what it should contain, and personally, equally importantly, what it shouldn't contain. So what should an engineering work package actually be? And we're going to look at what makes a good construction work package and what separates that CWP from an EWP. We're also going to create the constraints that we need to fully understand what has to be completed before an EWP or a CWP can be released. We spend a lot of time in AWP talking about IWP constraints, all the stuff that you need to have before you can release an IWP to the field, and that's very, very important. We don't always put the same amount of focus on the EWPs and the CWPs. In the end, this is a bundle of work that needs to get transitioned from one party to another. So we need to know, here's all the list of things that you need to do or that needs to be included in this before you should be handing it over to the next person in the stream. This is your last chance during detailed design to get things right before the work transitions to the field. Any issues or problems cost far more to solve when they're discovered by an installation crew. Sometimes fixing things upstream in engineering can feel like a chore. And also there's typically this push on capital projects to just get it out there, just get it out there, just get going. And I understand the push and the driver, but unfortunately, fixing things upstream in engineering is much easier, much simpler, and much more efficient than having 20 people standing around waiting for an RFI that says, yes, you have permission to cut a spool that's clashing with a steel beam because we didn't do enough work on our clash detection. So it's much, much more efficient to do this during detailed design. And one of the things we're going to be looking for is, where are you catching these problems? We want the fewest number of problems to reach the people with the hard hats. Simple as that. So now we're into the good bit. We're into the construction phase. You've done a lot of hard work during engineering. Now we're going to look at all the things you need to do during construction. So for those of you familiar, this is WFP, or work phase planning. And typically what I like to do is break these down into 3 phases, especially to ram home the point that some of this needs to be done even before the contractor arrives on site. So we're going to look at, what do we need to do before mobilization? What will be part of the work packaging effort once we get out there and start? And then how do we do progressing and closeout? So here we're going to be talking about things like creating a work phase planning plan, KPIs for work phase planning, and how dashboards can be used to visually manage your work packaging efforts. We'll look at, for work packaging itself, the key topics of graphical and non-graphical work packaging for making IWPs. And for those of you not familiar with the terminology, graphical work packaging is using the model and clicking on the model and saying, I want that, and that's my IWP. Non-graphical is typically, you've got a list like a cable schedule that doesn't exist in the model, but it's appended to the model as a list, and you can select the elements that you want. So we're going to look at graphical and non-graphical work packaging, and we're going to look at the identification and management of IWP constraints. So like I said, IWP constraints are very, very critical. And some of our clients within O3, again, start their AWP implementation by just considering constraints. That's all they want to start with, because that's their area of greatest problem. So this can be a crawl, walk, run approach. Lastly, we're going to look at progress reporting, test work packages, and system turnover. Those things that you need to do once your workplace planning system is up and running to make sure that everything's going well. And also the idea that system turnover and test work packages, you have to consider those very early. This is where the rubber meets the road, and you're actually going to put those into process. Then in a reflection of real life, we'll close out with lessons learned and continuous improvement. Okay, so that was a lot of talk about what we intend to show you. Rather than just talk about what we intend to show you, we figured it would probably be a good thing today to actually show you a couple of these things. So we're going to give you a preview of what these things might look like. So this isn't the final deliverable. There's actually going to be, final deliverables are going to be shared periodically over the course of the next year for the whole program. But we thought we'd give you a preview today of a couple of key topics for the first release. So this one, return on investment, all about the money. So we're going to take a look at this critical component of building your business case. Implementing AWP will cost money. And I'll pause there just to let that sink in, because I know there's some people who say, no, it shouldn't. It's never a case that it won't cost money. It's a case that if done properly, the return will outweigh the cost. So you are going to need people with a focus on this. You are going to need something as simple as workplace planners in the field creating IWPs. Hopefully you're going to need technology to support your AWP process. But what we can look at is, here's the costs on the one hand, and here's the savings on the other. And that's where that return on investment calculation comes in. So we can use the ROI tool from O3 to get a sense of what the costs are and what the savings could be on your project. And just as a little plug, oh, no, didn't want to go that far. Just as a little plug, there is a Cii tool, which I'm very familiar with because my subcommittee developed it for Cii about exactly the same thing, return on investment, that's done directly through Cii and leverages the information from RT 319 to show what the returns can be. So what I'm showing you here on the screen is this is the O3 version, but for those of you with Cii membership, there is a version over there as well. So in this case, we've got a project that's a $100 million TIC. And don't worry about the dollar, it can be yen or euros or whatever it is. So by inputting some basic project data into the ROI tool, we can see a significant return on investment. So showing here the cost of AWP, if you're doing AWP using O3, your costs are $408,000, which sounds like a lot, but remember the project TIC is 100 million. And what we're saying is, for that cost of $408,000, you can potentially show savings of up to $12.2 million, which is a very, very, very significant return on your investment. There's also, we can look at doing AWP manually, where actually the costs of doing AWP increase, because without a decent technology stack, it's going to take you more effort to produce your work packages, especially your IWPs in the field, and track them and manage them if you're going back to Excel. So your costs are slightly higher without technology, and your return is about 50% lower. So there is a lot more data and detail behind this tool. What you're seeing here is just a brief snippet. This tool can show you the various areas of saving and how they're going to benefit the project. And critically, we acknowledge the costs, which is often the largest stumbling block for new companies in making the decision to implement AWP. So we can show you and we can share with you what that ROI looks like, and we will do this in this same sort of strategy for this fake project that we're going to create as part of this AWP Implementation Toolkit. And this is the kind of thing that you're going to want to put on a PowerPoint presentation when you're going to see your boss and say, here's why we want to do AWP. Okay, so you figured out that AWP is going to save you money. You made your case to the management team and you got buy-in, but which project should you pick? So these next 3 slides are a brief extract from the AWP Toolkit to give you some ideas about picking the right pilot project. So firstly, there's going to be some external factors. You may not have a choice. If you're bidding work to the ever-increasing number of owners who are insisting on AWP for their projects, you're going to have to comply in order to get the work. So your AWP pilot project may be decided for you. You may also have a mandate from your management team. They want to choose a particular project that has strategic value for them, or is a high risk, and they recognize that AWP can help to de-risk the project. And sometimes you might find yourself participating in a joint venture that might stipulate the use of AWP as a requirement. So more and more projects are making AWP a standard. It will benefit you to get familiar with it as soon as possible. And oftentimes, don't wait for the mandate from the owner to get good at it. Try it out on your own projects first. Try it out on things where it's not mandated, so that by the time you get one of these mandates, you know what you're doing. Okay, so in the case where you're not being forced by your management team or an owner organization to do it, here's some useful tips for how to pick a pilot project. Avoid trying to implement AWP halfway through a project. Like I already said, if you start AWP a week before construction, you're not doing AWP. So find one that you can get into early, that's still in the early FEL stages. Select a relatively short project so the team can make improvements as you move through the stages. You want to learn your lessons. You want to consider this continuous improvement and a feedback loop. And you can't do that if it's a 5-year project and you wait until the end of 5 years to learn your lessons. Pick a project with an appropriate level of complexity, where early construction input can have a significant impact on the outcome. If you pick a project that's you're installing a new e-house and it's a lump sum bid to a single contractor and it takes 2 days to install it in the field, you're not going to get a lot of value out of that. Target the things that reflect the areas of concern and issue that your company has. So if you're great at doing pipe, but you're terrible at doing E&I, focus on a project that's got a decent E&I scope. Or if you're great at steel, but you're terrible at installing pipe, look at something that's got a decent piping scope. Select a project that forecasts an enticing projected ROI. So use the ROI tool that we were just talking about and go back, and if you've got 3 or 4 projects that you want to consider, then you can look at those, plug all 3 or 4 projects in and say, wow, this one out of all of those looks like it's got the best chance to have a decent ROI. And consider a project that includes all those key disciplines that you want to introduce AWP to. Now, that might be a crawl, walk, run. You might be, as I said, you might just want to pick one key discipline at the start. But if you're a mechanical contractor, you might want to look at pipe, steel, insulation, if that's something that's in your armory. So pick something that makes sense for you. Lastly, but certainly not least, consider the people. Picking the right team to implement AWP will likely be as important as the characteristics of the project itself. Let me just say that again. Picking the right team will be as important as the project. You need to look for a team that want to make it a success. People who can adapt their standard practices. To do this, look for people who understand the benefits and know that it will ultimately make them look good when they do the project earlier, cheaper, safer, when they deliver on their promises. Somebody who can recognize that implementing AWP is actually going to help them. You also want people who can understand what AWP is not going to change. So like I said earlier, AWP is broad and it can sound like a step change for the entire project delivery methodology. But a lot of the good things that your project team are doing won't go away. What we're talking about is standardization and arranging the existing deliverables in a way to support AWP implementation. So from the time I've been doing AWP, in my experience, a reluctant project manager or construction manager can kill an AWP implementation faster than any other element. If these people don't buy into it, it will not work. If the pilot is to be a success, if you get great outcomes from your pilot and you've got one project team who's holding up saying, hey, look, we did AWP and we saved time, we saved money, we didn't hurt anybody, etc., then it grows organically within your organization. Evidently, the other project teams are going to be looking over and saying, well, hang on, what did they do? How did they do that? They got this shiny new toy. I want that because it's going to make me look good. You don't have to sell it to everybody. Find the right team to start with, and it will grow organically after that. Okay, so that's a little bit of a snapshot of a couple of the things that we're going to be including in this AWP Implementation Toolkit, some of the things that we want to share, some of those sort of lessons learned and experience from the years. Before we go any further, let's take a quick look at what AWP information is already available in the industry. So we've talked already about CII, the Construction Industry Institute. And the good news here is we're not starting from scratch. There's a lot of information already available about AWP. Much of it is being championed by CII. O3 is an active member of CII with 3 of the current subcommittees being chaired by O3 personnel. So as a starting point, I wanted to show you what's already available to you. Unfortunately, this requires you to be a CII member. So for those of you that are, this is how to get into it. And for those of you that aren't, this is an indication of the kind of information that CII has that you might want to consider if you're looking to sign up for CII. So CII has compiled what it refers to as a landing page for AWP information, basically a place where all the information is collated together in one point. So to get to that, under resources, and this is the little GIF thing or GIF thing, depending on your pronunciation, it's showing you how to get there. So under resources, select AWP Overview. And from there, the information and tools are organized into 3 groups. So we've got Discover, we've got Engage, and we've got Expand. So this is what's in there. So they've done it in a very similar way to what we're talking about here in terms of the learn, plan, and then sort of walk through. So the Discover session would be equivalent to what we're calling learn. So this is what is AWP. So they've got an excellent AWP, what I would call AWP 101 for the American audience, the education primer. This is the basics. What is it in something that doesn't take 2.5 weeks to read? A very, very important one, AWP Acronyms and Definitions. We love them, unfortunately. I'm sorry. Everything is WFPs, AWPs, CWPs, IWPs. And for those people who are new to it, it can be maddening. So there's something there that speaks to, here's a list of all the definitions and acronyms. Then you get into the quite heavy information. You get into RT 272, which is where it all began, looking at work-phase planning as a best practice. So that's when they were trying to tackle the problem at the end by doing the installation work packages, and then bringing it back in RT 319 to AWP as a best practice, which is where they focus more on getting it back into the engineering stages to support the downstream part for the construction. And then there's a tool called from RT 365, which looks at overcoming implementation barriers, promoting the use of AWP. So a concierge tool where you can say, here's the issues I'm running into, and they've tried to sort of predict, here's all the issues you might have implementing AWP and provide solutions for those. In the engage stage now, so this is considering, right, you're into it, you're doing it. They want to look at AWP for frontline supervisors, which focuses more on the forepersons. How are those people impacted by AWP? How are we going to get that foreperson spending most of their time in the field instead of most of their time sitting at a desk? The AWP maturity level benefits tool, which looks at what we refer to as a crawl, walk, run approach. So it tries to shoot down this idea that AWP has to be an all or nothing, and looks at it from the perspective of, okay, if you're just going to implement it like this first, and then like this, and then like this, here's what it's going to cost you, here's what it's going to take, the resources you need, and the benefits associated with each layer. And those layers build on each other. So you can use it as a way to increase your maturity in a fairly systematic way. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you're getting into the AWP ROI tool, which is the CII version of the one we looked at earlier. Then getting into expand. So this is where you've already got a good grounding in AWP and you're looking to increase your company's maturity, which looks at things like supply chain, a lot of information about supply chain visibility and integrating the supply chain, AWP data requirements, which we touched on earlier. So again, like I said, Cii has done a great job of pulling together all the information that you need to be able to say to the engineering contractor, here's what we need to give us decent data to support AWP on a project. And then AWP for CNSU, commissioning and startup, which is obviously last for a reason because it's one of the last things that happens. And it's typically something that you don't tackle first time out. It's something that you start working into the more you get in knowledge and maturity in AWP. So other sources, there are other excellent sources for AWP information and training, and I haven't listed them all here. I've just cherry picked a few. So we've got COA, the Construction Owners Association of Alberta. So workplace planning was actually identified up in Canada in the oil sands region in Alberta. And COA has a very, very good library of advanced work packaging and workplace planning resources. COA and CII kind of partnered up on this to take that workplace planning and grow it into AWP. And the beauty of this with the COA stuff, it's available at no cost. You don't have any membership requirements there. Again, another free and available resource with no membership required, the AWP Institute, which was the first, I believe, non-profit organization set up to sort of promote the use of AWP. And then from the training side of things, Concord Academy provides self-paced training for AWP and workplace planning. And there are other training options available. There are some other excellent training materials out on the market today, but O3 is proud to sponsor with Concord Academy as part of our extensive partner network. Okay, so back to the implementation toolkit. What are we actually doing here today? Why are we here? And hopefully this is going to get to the point where I have to talk less and you guys get to get involved. So we want your opinion. We want to know what gaps you see. And I realize I ran through all of this fairly quickly, so we are going to do a brief recap here. We want to know what tools and information you need to make a case for AWP. We want to know what you can't find, what you don't understand, and what you need direction in. So we know that we don't know everything. You're all at different parts of your journey, and you've all had different experiences of AWP to date. So we want to understand the pain points, because chances are, if you're experiencing them, other people are too. So what we're looking to understand is that sort of table of contents that I ran through for what we're talking about doing for the implementation toolkit. Do you agree? Have I covered everything? Are there other things that you want to know? You know, what else do you need outside of that list that I ran through, which again, I'll recap so we know what we're talking about here. But what else do we need? We need to be listening to the people doing this so that we're not just sitting in an office somewhere saying, here's the answer to the question that we haven't actually asked you. So we're asking you the question. It's going to be too much to cover in one session. So as Tori mentioned right in the beginning, this is a first of a three-parter. So we're breaking it up into 3 parts. Today, we're going to look at the first workshop, as in building the foundation. So we're going to look at what you need to get started with AWP. First step, we're going to do this in sequential order because that's the only way my brain works. Next quarter, we're going to look at the early planning stages, that FEL2, FEL3, or select, define, or pre-feed and feed, depending on what you call it, and how to set up for AWP success. So this first phase is sort of pre-project, and then the next workshop, we're going to be focusing on the early stages of the project. And then first quarter next year, we're going to look at covering detailed design and the construction phases right up to commissioning and startup. So at each workshop, we want your opinion of what you need. Tell us the gaps that you see, and we will try to help craft this AWP implementation toolkit to cover them. So we're not expecting the answers from you, although if you have some suggestions as well, great, bring it on. I'm delighted to hear anything that anybody's got. But for the most part, what I'm trying to target is those people who, like I said, many years ago, me sitting in a chair with a blank piece of paper. What don't I know? So help me to fill in this table of contents to what we need to know. Okay, so this is a recap of that first slide where we talked about what we're planning to cover in this first session. So remember, this is an idea of what you need to get started with AWP. This isn't the project itself. This is everything you need before you start on the first project. So we're going to consider questions like, how are you going to sell this to your organization? Who do you need to convince? Why should you implement AWP? Is it going to cost you money? Is it going to save you money? And once you've decided to do it, what project should you pick? Which obviously we've already given you a preview of. What do you need to include in your procedure? That's a big one. Again, I've seen AWP procedures that are 10 pages long and 300 pages long. Some of them are really good and tell me everything I need to know, and some of them talk a lot about what AWP is without ever saying what it actually means to us as an organization. Supporting the procedure using something like workflows, which a lot of us are very, very graphical learners, and a lot of us, and you'll see this a lot in the sort of RT 272 and 319, there's a lot of these sort of flow charts, workflows that say, you know, here's the person that starts the thing, and then they need to do this and hand it over to this person and this person. So we're going to try to provide some of those workflows as a graphical representation of the process that this goes through. And then lastly, and certainly not least, we're going to look at what technology you need to use to support AWP. So that's what I'm planning to cover in the AWP Implementation Toolkit. And now is your time and your option to tell me, for everything leading up to starting that project, what else do you want to see for how to get started with AWP? What else are you missing? What other gaps are there? In order to get your input, we've created a Mural page. It's entirely web-based, so you don't need to install anything. And hopefully, as Tori already mentioned, you've already got an email that came out yesterday that told you how to access it. For those of you who didn't get that email or mislaid it, you just need to type this easy link into your web browser to open up the Mural screen. So it's bit.ly/AWP IT Implementation Toolkit, W1, Workshop 1. And just as a reminder, remember to leave your GoToMeeting open so that we can continue to hear the audio. So shortly here, we're going to be unmuting, or at least giving you the ability to unmute your microphones so that you can ask questions, and this can all be a bit engaging rather than just listening to me talk. So we're going to flip over to the Mural.
And yes, as a reminder, you now have permission to unmute yourself as an attendee. So you just do that within your controls if you'd like to say anything. So you should now have permission to do so.
Okay, so I'm going to run through what we're going to do, and then I'm going to let you loose on it. And this, the letting you loose part will also serve as a bit of a bio break for everybody in the middle here. So at the top section, what we're looking to find out, and I realize some of you, this is going to be a bit hard to see some of the information, but I'll show you the controls and everything here in a second. What we want to see is, who are you and who do you work for? And we've grouped these into, do you represent an owner organization? Are you an EPC or engineering contractor? Are you a construction contractor? Or do you work for a partner, vendor, a consultant, or other? Well, okay, somebody's moving the box. We should try to lock these down so we can't move them. Bear with me. Okay, so you're going to create a sticker. You're going to create a Post-it note. This is the electronic version of Post-it notes, so very exciting, and put it in here. A couple of ways to do it. You can grab anybody's, you can copy and paste it, or you can go in here, this little sticky note thing on the left-hand side, click that, select a sticky note, double click in the screen. What I will say is when you do that, it's going to be tiny and you won't be able to read it. So in order to do that, you just go into the corner and drag it down. And looks like, in terms of the other functionality, use your scroll wheel to zoom in, zoom out using your scroll wheel if you need to get in there and click something. And you can, if you click on the screen and drag, it will move the entire screen. So sorry if I'm giving anybody motion sickness when I do that, but that's the plan. So get your name in there, Get your organization in there. Don't worry if things are overlapping a little bit or if we're covering up slightly on somebody else's name, we can fix that later. Wow, okay. And yes, I'm going to try and lock these things so that we don't accidentally move some of the actual building blocks here. Okay. So we'll give everybody a minute to get their names in and put yourself into which group you're sitting in. And remember, you can follow along with the mural directly on your screen, or you can follow it along in GoToMeeting looking at my screen, whichever you prefer. But this top section first, that's just the meet and greet. And I think I have to call out specifically here Max Eklund for the amazing artistry on his one there. That must have taken a bit of time. Well done, Max. Okay, so while you're looking at that, the next thing that we're going to look at here is in part one. In part one, we're calling this is the push session. And for those of you not familiar with the terminology, the push session simply means I'm going to be talking to you rather than a pull session, which is going to be you guys providing information back to us. So the push session is basically what I've done is I've pre-populated. Here's what we're already got, and here's what we're already planning to include. So please try not to move any of the existing sticky notes that are already there. So for the learn section, so again, this is a little bit of a refresher for what we've been talking about. For the learn session, we're going to look at AWP literature and best practices, AWP 101, definitions and acronyms, some of the stuff we already covered earlier, return on investment, AWP maturity and benefits, implementation category, so the idea that we don't need to just implement AWP as an all or nothing, developing a business case, and project selection criteria. So those are the things that we're already planning to include in this toolkit. So that's the stuff, we don't need to repeat it. If you're good with that list, just tell me what else you'd like to see that's not included in that list. And then for the plan stages, an AWP and workplace planning procedure, literally your manual on how to do AWP for your organization, which whatever we create, just for the record, is not going to be perfect for everybody, but hopefully it will give you all a decent starting point and you can modify it to suit the particular terminology of your organization, or if you're an owner or an EPC, there's going to be some slight nuances, etc. AWP process workflows, the implementation barriers that are already available in that Cii tool that I was referencing, the concierge, technology map and selection. So when I say a technology map, what I mean is AWP technology is taking a whole bunch of things and grouping them together into one place. So we're not replacing P6, we're not replacing your estimating software, we're not replacing your commissioning and startup. But what good AWP technology like O3 does is situate itself in the middle and have links to all those different bits of technology so that you can understand what things need to be involved in making AWP successful from a technology perspective. We can look at training, what training is available, a deliverables list, what do I need to do during each stage to make AWP successful, and a RACI matrix, which again, for those of you not familiar, RACI standing for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. Sometimes there's an S in there as well for support, but we'll focus on the RACI matrix, which tells you for each of these deliverables who has to do it and who needs to be involved. So that's the push part. That's what we are planning to tell you. So now we get to release you to talk back to us. I'm just going to put that up there and give us your thoughts. And somebody's already beat me to the punch. Excellent. Whoever's doing that in green, you keep going. That's exactly what we need. Habib, we might want to put that up the top if we can, please. So in these two sections, learn and plan, and I've put a little sort of template one in there, just as you can click on that and copy and drag it if you want, and create your own versions. But what else do you need? So we've already got somebody here, something like AWP performance metrics. Excellent. So what else do you need? What else do you want to support your AWP implementation and to help your company make a plan for how to do AWP? So we'll give this, I think we've got a bit of time here, so we're going to give this about 15 minutes. Get your ideas in. If anybody needs a bio break, now's the time. Have a quick cup of tea, but get some ideas in place. This is your chance to tell us what you need, and then we can make sure that we can include your information or include the things that you're missing into what we produce here. Any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. Tori has now released your microphones, so you now have, we're hopefully not going to unmute everybody at the same time because we've got 50 odd people in here. But if anyone has got any specific questions, feel free to unmute your microphone. I'll stay with my headset on, so if anyone's got any questions, fire away. Otherwise, I'm going to stop talking for a minute.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine, yeah.
Yeah, I could not. I'm calling from my mobile phone, so I would like to. This is Luigi Anselmi from Tecnimont, EPC global contractor, and we are running AWP, and that provides great benefit. But the point that I would like to know: how do you harmonize the data from engineering, from different sources, in order then to be properly coded and flowing into the AWP and eventually installation work packages?
Yeah, excellent, Luigi. Yes, definitely a very real issue. Speaking specifically with my 03 t-shirt on, 03 has a data specification that we provide to our clients. And what that does is it tells people, especially the engineering contractor, right up front, in order to make the system work, here's the information that we need. And we can walk them through, here's the information requirements, here's how it needs to come in. And this can look at all of the different data points, anything from engineering information, material information, what your schedule, how your P6 schedule information needs to come in. Because like I said, the AWP technology works best when it doesn't try to replace everybody's tools, when it sits in the middle. So you need to have an AWP tool set that can go and dig into that information. And sometimes that's a question of Excel spreadsheets get sent back and forth, or CSV flat files get sent back and forth with information on it. And sometimes, in the best cases, it's a question of what they refer to as an API, which is basically two computers talking to each other. So the data is an automatic flow. So what we do for 03 as part of our implementations, especially with new clients, is we'll provide them with this data specification early. And then as part of our implementations, we'll take the data that they have, bring it in, assess it, look at it, and hopefully we're doing this early on so that it can still be modified as easily as possible. And we'll bring it in, populate it into our tool, see what the gaps are, and work through closing those gaps with the client. Because one of the key things, and Luigi, I know you know this from an engineering perspective, it's best to fix the problems at source. What we want to try to get away from, and what I've seen done in AWP projects in the past with technology, is you get information from engineering and it's not complete. But instead of going back to engineering and trying to fix it, we spend our time, the service provider like 03 or equivalent spends their time trying to augment that information. Yeah. And the best thing we can do for all of us is get that information early enough and go back to the engineering contractor and make sure they understand what we need and what they need to do to get that working for us.
Yeah, that's clear.
Does that answer your question?
In other words, you set an ETL. In other words, so in a protocol of data interface, somehow.
Yes, okay. Absolutely. And the best interfaces are the API ones, because that doesn't involve a human sitting in the middle. Some interfaces get a bit more complicated, like Primavera, for example. It's very easy for us to pull information from Primavera. Very rarely do we get a client who wants us to push information back to Primavera, because oftentimes or at the minimum, they're going to want to have like a planner scheduler sitting in the middle of that to double check the information. They don't like that automatic refresh of information in P6.
Right.
So there's a lot of churn there in terms of there's a lot of time it takes to set up. Now, the beauty of this is, because we're all getting better at this, and because certainly on our side, our technology is built for AWP, sometimes, and in projects I had 5-6 years ago, getting some sort of technology set up might take you months. And we're now getting to the point where, because this technology, certainly from an O3 perspective, we've done a lot of integration with a lot of different tools. We haven't, I don't think, yet found one that we can't integrate with. And everybody's getting to the point where more and more people are understanding the data requirements, and those implementations are getting much, much shorter. But again, same old story, do it early enough.
Thank you, very kind. Very, very self-explanatory.
Sounds good.
Andrew, we've got a question that came in. It's in regards to the ROI. And it is, what are the basis of the ROI? What are the factors considered to derive the ROI based on what type of project?
Wow. Okay. If we've got about an hour or so, I'll answer you. I'll try and give you the 5-minute version. So first up, the savings side of things. So the savings side of things, both from the ROI, from the O3 one, and also the one with that the Performance and Benchmarking Subcommittee created for CII, the savings look at RT319. So RT319 was the one that turned workplace planning into advanced work packaging, and it looked at a lot of case studies. So what the savings are looks at, and they've got this spider diagram that shows, potential savings in cost, in schedule, in safety, quality, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got the option there the savings are geared towards the results from that, because we're not trying to recreate the wheel here. We're trying to say these case studies have already been done, and we're leveraging that best practice, because RT319 was the thing that got AWP to be a best practice with CII. So the savings are leveraged off that. One thing I will say that's very important about the savings, you don't get all of the savings the first time you do it. So the mantra within and the sort of headline, if you like, within AWP circles in terms of the savings is you can save 25% of your labor costs in the field, which typically equates to, if your labor is about 40% of your TIC, saving 25% of your labor equates to 10% TIC. So that's the best case scenario, and you're not going to get there overnight. You don't do that the first time. I've worked for companies, I've worked on mega projects where the intent for the first implementation of AWP was just to be on time and on budget, because for mega projects, that's a resounding success, just to be on time and on budget, and using AWP as a methodology to de-risk the project and stop it going over. So we look at, when we're looking at these ROI tools, we look at the organizational maturity. Is this the first time you're doing it? Because if so, we're not going to promise you that you're going to get the full savings the first time. We also look at the other biggest variable is when, and therefore what type are you doing? So when we built the one for CII, what we were looking at was, if you come to us and do an ROI during FEL2, then you have the option of doing full AWP. You have the option of doing all these things that we've been talking about in this presentation so far. If you come to us a week before construction, you can still get savings, but the savings are less because you've missed out on the opportunity to do a lot of the upfront planning that you could have done during FEL2, FEL3, etc. So we scaled the return on investment based on your maturity and what stage of the project you're at, or what type of AWP you're going to be doing, because everybody always wants to think they're going to do it perfectly first time. Then we looked at, on the flip side of that, so the savings came from the CII thing, we factored it based on your organizational maturity and the timing. And then from the cost side, we looked at basically people, process, technology. So for the people side of things, it depends, and it's scaled to the size of the project and the duration of the project. So who needs to be involved that's new? So like an AWP champion that might not be in your organizational chart typically. Who needs to be involved earlier? So for instance, a construction manager, you're going to need a construction manager anyway, but part of the process of AWP is to get that construction manager to come in sooner in the process. So we extended the cost, if you like, of the construction manager. So that delta in cost was included. Workplace planners, the cost of workplace planners. So we looked at the cost of the various people needed to do it. And we looked at the cost of things like training those people. Then you're getting into technology, where the technology is, if you're going to need, if you're going to execute $1 billion project, you're not going to do it with a piece of paper and a pencil. So what does the technology cost look like? And we scale the technology cost relative to the TIC of the project. And all of these are factored against the durations. So speaking specifically to the CII one, you enter 5 pieces of data. You tell us the size of your project, and I'm trying to do this backwards because you're seeing me in reverse. So you do the size of the project, the duration of construction phase, the duration of the overall FEL2 to mechanical completion and startup. You do your organizational maturity and which category of AWP you do. You tell us those 5 things and we give you an answer. And then within the tool, you can enter user-defined values that can supersede whatever we've put in. So we put in a lot of the data and all the calculation behind it. And then you can enter user-defined values. Say, for instance, we put in an assumed amount for what does a construction manager cost you every month. And if you know better, if you know differently, you can change it to what yours is. So, sorry, that was kind of the 5-minute version of something that took 6 months to produce. But the ROI is intended to be an open book conversation about, yes, AWP is going to cost you money, but the savings are going to massively outweigh the cost. Thank you for the question. Okay, so it looks like we're getting a lot of things in Learn, which is figuring out what AWP is. And we haven't yet got anything in plan, so we might be able to, once we come back, once everybody's back in place, we'll give it another 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll review them, and then we're going to vote on them. So the good thing about this is, oh, there you go, we've got our first in plan. Thank you very much for the person who just put theirs in plan. Gives us good balance. So part of what we're going to do here is we're going to vote on these so that we can get an understanding of everybody who's got interest in the same things, because some of these might be ones that somebody else has come up with, and you can help us to vote on these and show which are the most critical for everybody to consider. So like I say, I'm going to, unless anyone has any other questions, or unless anyone's got questions on how the Mural's working or anything else, I'll put myself on silent for a second and give you guys another 5 minutes, and then we'll take a look at what we've got in the Mural. Okay, so we'll give you guys another 4 minutes. At 1:15, we're going to get into a quick review of each of the notes that we've got, and then we're going to get into the voting session. So if anyone's got any more that they want to add, you've got 4 minutes to do it, or if anyone wants to step away and grab a tea or a coffee, now is the time. And just as a heads up, for the person who sticky reads 6WLA, you're going to need to help me out with that one. I'm not sure what that means, so if you can spell that out a bit more, that'd be great. And also, just as an aside, if any ideas come to you, or if anyone's got something in particular that they really think about, 6-week look ahead, thank you very much. If anyone's got any ideas or things that they come to after the fact, feel free to send them in. We're going to share an email address at the end of the presentation. And as Tori already mentioned, you'll get a copy of a link to a copy of the presentation itself and information on how to contact us. So this whole purpose of this is to get some feedback and get information from you guys. So now is the time. What's the thing they say in weddings? Speak now or forever hold your peace. And don't worry too much about the learn and plan boxes. If you're not sure where to put it, just put it somewhere. We'll figure it out. Don't worry about that. Hang on, I'm gonna try. I thought I'd locked most of this stuff. This is always the joy of Mural. Getting 20 odd people into a space where they can move stuff around. This is excellent. Okay, another couple of minutes and then we'll go through a recap, the review. We got the countdown timer going, Terry. Okay, minute to go. And then we'll go through and read them. So if anyone's got any last minute ideas, get them in now. Okay, we're going to call time on that session. So thank you very much for everybody who put a sticky note in. We're going to go through them now, review them, and then we are going to have a voting session. So I'm going to get rid of the two that I call template because I don't think we need those anymore. Big blue here, I don't think has any writing in it. Okay, let's have a look at what we've got. Okay, in no particular order, I'm just going to go top row, left to right. AWP performance metrics. Best practice leading and lagging key performance indicators. And again, I think one of the critical ones of that is recognizing that the KPIs change from phase to phase. So the engineering KPIs are not the same as the construction KPIs. So yes, we can certainly look at those performance metrics and key performance indicators, things to look out for to make sure you're on the right track. AWP roles and expectations. Yes, excellent. actual data of measurable results to support the expected benefits. Yeah, that's a big one. How do you know that AWP is bringing the benefits that you planned or that you sold to your management team? So similar, I think, in the sense of the KPIs, but the KPIs are more forward-looking, and the measurement of the results would actually be backwards looking to show where, how things panned out. AWP change control, well, luckily in all the years I've been doing construction, change management has never been a problem. We've never had any change orders on a project. And again, for those of you who don't know me very well, that is sarcasm. Yes, change management is a big issue and continues to be. So something that AWP needs to make sure it handles. Real project success stories of implementing AWP. Yeah, I mean, again, that's the perfect place for it, because as part of selling it to your management team, obviously most people don't want to be the guinea pig for the first time that this is done. So people want to know that somebody else has already trod this path and you're not the first one. So that's good. Contractual setup between EP and C, what to include and what to avoid. Interface management, different people involved. Yeah, and the contracting one is difficult because everybody's got a different methodology for doing it. But certainly I think we can at least show you a model of what, in a typical structure where you've got an EP or an EPC or whatever it is, and the relationship of all of those with the owner, because the other key point there is typically the owner is the pivot point between those various organizations. Scalability for portfolio projects. Before I joined O3, the last place I was working for a small cap group, trying to implement AWP on a small cap projects in Texas, and there are different challenges, certainly. Best practice KPIs between work group interaction and communication. So looking at how the various teams need to talk to each other and communicate. Roles and responsibilities and timing. Okay, so we've got a couple of roles and responsibilities there. In the EPC, which management shall lead AWP implementation? Yeah, absolutely. So again, the roles and responsibilities, and it's a lot of these, sometimes now we're creating new titles for things. So it's difficult to know from a traditional standpoint who this needs to be. There's one of the things that we're going to cover as well is just who's the AWP champion in general, for the owner, for the contractor. Who does that person need to be? What does that need to look like? EP and C contractors alignment. Yeah, absolutely. So looking at the same as the one, or similar to the one on the left-hand side, about how to set up that structure and make sure that everybody knows who's doing what and is delivering. Examples of actual completed projects ROI with support. Yeah, ROI is a difficult one there because completed projects are very often very hesitant to share financial information. Oftentimes they will provide information about the safety outcomes, the schedule outcomes, sort of the overall global, we saved X amount of money on the project. But certainly, yeah, it looks like we've got some good requests here for information about showing us previous projects outcomes. AWP for portfolio projects. And thank you for clearing up that acronym. And I have to say, I've got respect for that, because when I was running construction projects, we would do 3-week look aheads. So the person who's looking for 6-week look aheads gets more into the timing of the work packaging for AWP, and certainly for work phase planning. So we can look at providing some graphics around when do you build the IWP, when does it need to be constraint free, et cetera, et cetera. So that's good, and that'll feed into that 6-week look ahead. Quick start guides. Wow, that's a big one. Quick start guides. Quite honestly, the quick start is getting good at it and getting repetitive at it. You're not going to quick start the first time, but I like the idea of sort of a condensed version. Once you've done the implementation the first few times, then sort of a cheat sheet, what do you guys call it, Cole's notes version of how to do it. Best practices, where to put deliverables, EWPs and CWPs. Yes, big fan of that, because too many times I see EWPs with construction content in it, and construction work packages don't have the necessary engineering. Creating that dividing line between the two is difficult because everybody wants to be involved. So absolutely. Okay, successful implementation in brownfield projects and operating plants. Yeah, what are the additional considerations for brownfield? Excellent. How does one move data between companies and software into O3? Yep, so we can look at that as part of the technology selection and that technology map that we're talking about. So that's good. Visualizing the path of construction, 4D. Yeah, absolutely. For those of us spent time in the construction industry, a lot of people are graphical learners. And a P6 schedule, you can throw a 100-page P6 schedule on a screen, and it's great, but doesn't help. Whereas for those of you not sure what that means, you can create, you can take the 3D model and time phase it, line it up against your schedule, and basically play it back so that things start appearing in the order that your schedule says they're going to happen. And it's a brilliant, brilliant tool. So yes, absolutely, I'll make sure we include something about that. Thank you for that one. Turnover packages and startup work packages. Yeah, absolutely. Testing turnover and startup is typically pushed off to the back end because everybody's talking about bulk construction. So that's one that often gets lost. How to define effective construction work areas there, and I think the key word there is effective, because I mean, quite honestly, you can draw boxes on a plot plan, but what do we need to make sure that those construction work areas are effective? How to convince contractor of EPC project about what benefits he will get while executing the project using AWP set our sales to the client. Yeah, and this is again another one of those tricky ones that's a product. Okay, sorry folks, I've had a bit of a network issue, so I'll turn my camera on. Can everybody still hear me?
Yes.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes. Much better, Andrew. Can you hear us okay?
Good.
I'm not hearing well.
Yeah, we're not hearing anything.
Where was I? Oh yeah, so the ROI tends to look at the project. Yeah, I can hear you just fine. The ROI tends to look at
Okay.
Andrew, I think you've self-muted.
I'm not on. Why aren't you hearing me?
There you are.
Okay.
Stay there. Yeah.
Oh, we're back. Am I here? Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Okay. The joys of us trying to do remotely. Okay, so for the plan section, I'll rattle through these and then we can get to the version. AWP in BIM design. The path of construction, AWP influence how long it takes to implement a pilot project. Yeah, good idea. AWP schedule structure, EWP, CWP, IWP. How to pick the right technology. Influence of procurement on AWP success. Yes, big issue. Schedule using IWPs, CWPs. Communication plan, which I think we touched on some of that there with the various stakeholders. Challenges and lessons learned from brownfield projects portfolio. Workplace planning system collecting actual % complete, man hours and progress. And QC tracking system, progress monitoring system. So excellent, we've got a couple of really good ones there. And now what we get to do is you guys get to voice which of these are important to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick off a voting session. Everybody's going to get 2 votes, not 5. So you're going to get 2 votes. And the way you cast your vote once I start the voting session is you simply click on the 2 that are the most important to you. You click on the actual sticky notes. If you clicked accidentally, you can right click, which will undo your votes. And then you can vote whichever one. So if everybody please, you should get a notification here in a second saying we're starting the voting. Okay, so click the card, shift click to remove it, and your vote is anonymous. So everybody, please tell us which of these excellent ideas are most important.
Andrew, I believe your audio cut out again. If you could maybe repeat that last bit there.
Sorry, everybody gets 2 votes. Click on the 2 that are most important to you. So all you've got to do is click on on 2 of these stickers. Did that come through, Tori? Are you hearing me again now?
Yes, we could hear you. Okay, thanks.
Excellent. Okay, we've still got 24 people voting, so we'll give it another couple of minutes. Everybody just click on the 2 that are, and then we'll take a quick look at the results, and then we'll get to the wrap up, and I think we'll be able to give you about 20 minutes of your morning back, or your afternoon, depending on where you are. Okay, 1 more minute, folks, and then I'll end the voting session. Okay, good stuff. Thank you everyone for voting. Let's take a look at, yeah, we're gonna have to end the session now. Well, I'll tell you what, another 30 seconds. If anyone else needs the last 30 seconds to cast their vote, please do it right away, and then I'll end it.
Sorry, I don't see the vote, tag or anything that I have to do it.
Yeah, it's really quirky. They come up as tiny little clicks in the corner. You'll see it now once we end it. Okay, let's have a look, see what everyone's got. Okay, so 3 votes each: successful implementation in brownfield projects and operating plants, influence of procurement on AWP success, EP and C contractors alignment, and change control. Intellectual progress, collect. Ban votes, work planning system, actual progress, hours progress, P6 using the CWP and IWPs, example projects, portfolio projects, practices, where to put the laws to include and what to avoid. A bunch down here that have 1 vote. So excellent, and gives us some excellent feedback and ideas for how to move forward with this. So thank you everybody. Session. I'm going to flip back to the PowerPoint, participating in the Mural to. Okay. So first up, next steps. Please join us for workshop 2. We're going to be looking to cover setting up for AWP success for FELs 2 and 3, and a link will be sent out to all registrants. So I'm delighted to say that's the last you're going to be hearing from me this morning, and I'll transition back to Tori to finish off and seal this one out.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. thank you for participating in Mural, and we apologize for a little bit of the audio connectivity issues, but hopefully you were able to grasp everything that we discussed and have some good takeaways. So what you can do next, further your learning with AWP, you can go to our website at www.o3.solutions. And we have a vast library of resources on AWP, from case studies, and we publish a blog very frequently, once a week to several times a month. And then you can always check out our past webinars. We always put those on our website for you so you can catch up, and they're free to everyone. And then we create plenty of videos that are range a variety of topics on AWP. So you can find all of that at our website. And just to stay up to date on everything else, you can sign up and subscribe to our monthly newsletter. That way you never miss anything new that we're putting out there as far as content or events. So thank you again for joining us. And if you have any more questions, we would love to hear from you. You can always email us at info@o3.solutions. Or again, you can visit our website, find resources. You can contact us through the website as well. And we appreciate your time today, and we hope to see you at the next session. And again, be on the lookout for that link, and that registration will be in our newsletter, and we'll send out a webinar invite when the time comes. But thank you again for joining us, and have a great rest of your week.